May 29, 2025, I present here some initial so-called pages from my Nefelim Thread section of the trustedcommunications.com website and some on my corresponding Facebook topic page. These differ in various areas from the similar individual pages I posted earlier on Facebook. Stories of Atlantis, a sister page to this YouTube offering. Here anyone can look at the initial postings without first having a Facebook account, one of my bigger complaints about Facebook. Do enjoy and ask questions as you desire. I organized this presentation to be 8½ by 6 inches, rather than the typical 8½ by 11 inches to make the reading easier, essentially larger display fonts when this is seen as an MP4 video.
Trusted Communications, the Nefelim Thread. General background information on what, where, and why. Here you will find an initial emersion into my larger collection of essays concerning my memories of what happened with Atlantis, how it came about, who the players were, its purpose in the grander scheme of things, how it came to be destroyed, and the collection of worldwide problems left over from the fall. This thread is a hopefully simpler emersion into the story as contained in my research paper on the history of the Nephilim in Atlantis, or the much larger set of book chapters of Dancing with the Nephilim, Tango with the Nephilim, and Waltzing with the Nephilim. These are my personal views regarding the nature of human relationship with the aliens as expressed via close embrace couples dancing. The dancing section covers events from around 3 billion years ago to the mid-time point of Atlantis. Next is the tango section covering the fall of Atlantis and extending up to the current day. The waltzing section is about future stuff to come and how the larger story arc hopefully comes to completion. One of these days I hope to have clickable audio of this page and in different languages. In the past I have focused on Polish. Page 1, the Atlantis story. For millions of years the alien Nephilim have pushed forward on an effort to move their entire population to Earth from their almost native planet. They live underground and inside of their planet as it orbits our sun in the very dark and cold of space where surface living is impractical. They are limited in their efforts by an adverse issue of orbital mechanics which limits their active work on Earth to about 50 years out of every 3,600. Early on in their efforts they did all of their Earth habitat construction work by themselves, but around 8,000 years ago they created a batch of very long-living normal-looking humans who in time became the inhabitants of Atlantis. Those Atlanteans, who collectively called themselves the Ka, a Sumerian word, had a set of genetics that are not too far distant from modern-day people, except all their health maintenance abilities at the DNA level were activated and kept that way. A Ka person, man or woman, could expect to live for 8,000 years in the prime of health and away from death, bearing issues of murder, starvation, or physical catastrophe. The Nephilim are a bespoke, made to order for a specific purpose, alien race that have external body features that vaguely appear as human, but they are reptilian at their very core. They are hairless and tan-colored in appearance, very intelligent, very knowledgeable, and capable of harboring and expressing extreme emotions and feelings of anger and resentment when given reason to do so. They have an existential need to move their population to Earth, or something equivalent, and in the absence of doing so will eventually die as a species if the move is not completed. They are very motivated in completing their move from where they live to Earth. The destruction of Atlantis injected a massive disruption to this migration activity. But they are still alive, and will be returning again shortly. And they will not be stopped in their population migration efforts. At one extreme, they are practical in nature and can work with the existing human population of Earth in completing their move. At the other extreme they would have no problem in wiping out the entire population of Earth, maybe with retaining some of the population, and not quite starting over again, as most of their habitat construction efforts in the Middle East are still in place and usable, albeit with some degree of recovery work. Page 2, Who are the Nephilim and their Anunnaki? The Nephilim are an alien species. They are not human, except in a minor form of physical resemblance, head, body, arms, and legs. They have an authoritarian organization of governance in which their active direction comes from an interior group known as the Anunnaki. That word is carried over into the Ka era existence of Atlantis, and as a distinct third group of post-destruction Ka-Atlanteans of individuals with more modern-day names like Ea, Enlil, Enki, and Mami as described in the Atrahasis translations of the Babylonian epic of creation, also known as Enuma Elis. The primary purpose of the Anunnaki is in doing whatever is considered necessary to preserve the survival of their containing society. The Nephilim Anunnaki have as their primary task the completion of the migration of the Nephilim population to Earth, and a secondary task of carrying on the uplift, an SF term, debt obligations imposed on them by their creators, the Pleiadians. The Atlantis-era Ka-Anunnaki has as their primary obligation the completion of habitat construction efforts, mostly below ground in the Middle East, and supporting the alien Nephilim in their debt obligations with the Pleiadians. The primary debt obligation was to collect human emotion for export off of Earth and into the wider near-galactic larger society that include the Pleiadians and their trading partners. The post-Atlantis destruction era of surviving Ka-Anunnaki, being Ea, Enlil, Enki, had as their primary task to continue, where possible, the activity of Atlantis, despite its destruction, and support the Nephilim on their subsequent returns. In this collection of stories, Atlantis was destroyed some 7,500 years ago, and the Nephilim have returned twice in that time frame. You can think of the old city of Sumer as an Atlantis 2.0 build. The debt obligation of harvesting of human emotion was carried out through alien equipment deployed underground in the Earth in the vicinity of human population centers. The alien equipment, in conjunction with specially designed human DNA, also built for specific purpose, induced schism in any human group that exhibited unification of action. The induced schism resulted in fighting actions between the schism group members, and the alien tech machines collected and stored the harvested emotion for physical export off-planet. The machines were installed during the operating time of Atlantis, and were regularly serviced up until the time of the destruction. The machines have a storage bin of containers which had been removed and replaced by empty containers, but this all stopped when Atlantis was destroyed. The machines are still in place and operating, but the contents of the containers have turned toxic, and the toxicity has been leaking back into the environment for the past 3,000 years. The leaking toxicity aggravates the destructive nature of humanity, leading to ongoing war and conflict. And people wonder why the Middle East countries are in such a mess. Page 3, Uplift drives everything. Uplift is a term from science fiction and popularized in the works of David Brin. The term describes the relationship between technologically advanced alien species and adopted subtechnology species, some from genetic engineering and construction. The advanced aliens uplift, as a verb, an inferior or new species and give them a technological background and training in exchange for perpetual servitude as an adopted species. The adopted species gets a technological boost without having to develop the technology themselves. In this context, technology refers to activities like spaceflight and access to and use of energy resources. The alien races that inhabit some of the planets in the Pleiades, herein identified as the Pleiadians, have been in existence for billions of years. They are masters at the uplift craft and answer to no other higher authority, but they are just one of a vast and diffuse spectrum of aliens in our galaxy. Most of the high-tech species practice uplift, it is simply the nature of the game when conducting galactic trade. In the trade process, one part of the galaxy produces something found or deemed to be desirable to different parts of the galaxy. It is all about, I have, or can get, something that I think you might like. What do you have in exchange that can be seen as of equal or tradable value? Page 4, Ka genetics, it takes two Ka to make a Ka. The Atlantean Ka people looked like normal humans, perhaps a bit taller and larger, and certainly better looking in appearance and health. They had to be long-lived to span the 3,600-year orbital period of the Nephilim home world. The Nephilim would place certain Ka individuals in positions of responsibility to carry out and complete tasks initiated before they had to leave on the last flight out back home. Upon return, the Nephilim would be looking to see that assigned duties were carried out or completed. Their genetics were not that far from normal detuned humans on Earth, it was just that their genetics were oriented on keeping the Ka healthy and long-lived. The problem was, however, that a Ka individual, man or woman, could produce children with normal detuned humans, but children of such a union were only genetically detuned humans, not another Ka or something approaching a Ka. There were no so-called mules. Progeny of a male and a female Ka were themselves Ka genetically equipped Atlanteans. Thus, the assertion it takes two Ka to make a Ka. This produced a bit of a problem for the Ka society, concerns bordering on fear of the society devolving into degenerative inbreeding. The society was just large enough to avoid inbreeding issues, but only just. The concerns over degenerative inbreeding combined with a guild or clan orientation within the society led to the situation where women were always assigned the status of free agency, where a woman could leave one family line, guild or clan, for another, taking her genetics with her, for another different family line without social constraint. Women did not have to get a divorce or consent from any authority to move at will. The Ka society had about 30 family lines, each with a particular functional focus within the society and having a representative on the ruling council of family heads. Family heads were generally men who could have more than one wife at any point in time. While this process worked for many years, it all fell apart when Atlantis was destroyed. The destruction of the island and the dispersed outposts terminated the delicate free agency status of women, and in time inbreeding became paramount and the society began deteriorating. There came a time many years after the fall where the population of female Ka fell below a critical point and male Ka turned to generic human women just to get sons and daughters who would end up as temporary, working family line members and also as people to take care of the degenerating Ka elders. From this situation sprung the story of men of renown seeking to have children with daughters of Earth, and the story recorded in Genesis 6:1-4. Page 5, the transport device, getting close to beam me up Scotty. The primary focus of the Nephilim was to complete their population migration to Earth. Central to this focus was the machine or device that would get individuals debarking at a space station in synchronous orbit down to Earth in one easy step. Their desire was that the mechanism did not rely on any kind of space shuttle or craft that at any point in time relied on the use of chemical rockets. Their choice in this effort was to make use of an alien-designed and built machine that transported people of their race down to Earth. So, I identify a transport system composed of Earth downside and up in-orbit topside components, herein identified as the TD and its operating peer the PD. The PD was incorporated as part of a space station that once resided in synchronous orbit above present-day Kenya. The TD was situated in a transport complex excavated out of a mesa in the central part of Atlantis. Working together, the TD would receive a digital description of a scanned object, material or flesh, and reproduce in physical mass the equivalent of the scanned object. Object scanning was destructive in nature. Once scanned, the source object was dematerialized and the mass held in secondary storage. The transport system worked in both directions, as long as the accumulated direction flow was kept balanced. Dematerialized material was used in the reverse transport direction. One could get up and back down without the use of chemical rockets, and decidedly much quicker. Together they had a vague resemblance to the transporter of Star Trek fame and perhaps a better resemblance in concept to the Stargate of the SG-1 story fame, as there were two identical devices at both ends of the transport mechanism. Operating together they were the tentpole of the Ka society. Without a working TS there was no reason for Ka society members to exist or to have a useful purpose. While the destruction of the Atlantis island was regrettable, the loss of the downside TD was the killer that disrupted the Nephilim migration effort. It may be the case that the Nephilim have backup equipment, that certainly makes sense to me. The TD and the PD looked considerably different, though that is not particularly important. The TD looked like a large black and unadorned half-tube with a flat underside and capping quarter hemispheres at each end, dimensions, 15 feet in radius and 300 feet in length. While there were some access panels, the machine was essentially self-contained and closed to the outside. It had its own internal power source, but was primarily controlled by a staff device, You can think TV remote if that helps, and other control panel mechanisms inside of the transport complex control room. There was a long period of time when the TD was parked in semi-adjacent proximity to its PD up in synchronous orbit. A time came in the developing history of Atlantis when the TD was slowly lowered from its parked position down to Earth, where it was installed in a specially built hangar in the transport complex. You can think of the hangar as a specially excavated cave that had an opening in a vertical cliff face of a mesa. The use of the word cave is a bit misleading, as the floor of the hangar had to be perfectly smooth, flat and level. The cliff face was oriented to the south, towards the equator, and the TD would slightly extend out of the hangar opening to a convenient point over a parabolic reflecting radio telescope-like mirror dish in a fixed position below and slightly away from the cliff face. Getting the transport complex and the hangar constructed was a major job of the chief engineer, CE. The CE was also responsible for getting the TD safely down from orbit and installed in its hangar. A good portion of the Tango with the Nephilim book deals with this activity. While the TD and associated equipment was critical for conducting the Nephilim migration, it was just a device that got the Nephilim situated. Their real purpose for the Nephilim was in the harvesting of human emotion for export off-planet, of course via the TD and PD pair of machines. Other page topics in this thread. Alien tech is better than your tech. Kingship on Earth. Advanced tech through crystals, energy from the vacuum of space, 0 point. How to move a world's population around. An island in the Red Sea, about 160 miles northwest of present-day Jeddah. Beyond microwaves for ultra-dense communications. The nature of spirit and Atlantis. Pleiadians as carnivores of humans. All of the information on this site is copyright by Alan Lee Whiteman.